Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bassam Haddad. I am the founding director of the Middle East and Islamic Studies program at George Mason University, and I work very closely with the Gaza in Context project, which you can find at palestineincontext.org. This is part two, or actually it's week three, but part two of our mini film festival, in which we are holding this interview with director Michael Workman, who is with us today. I'll introduce him in just a moment. Sorry, Michael, this is very awkward that you're sitting there and I haven't even talked to you, but welcome, Michael.
Thanks. It's really an honor to be here.
Same here, my friend. And we are also holding another interview with the director of the Palestine Exception. And this will be tomorrow at 5 p.m. with the director Jennifer Ruth. And there will be a screening tomorrow of the film The Palestine Exception at 5 p.m. here. Wherever you're watching, just come back and it will happen here. We have screened The Encampments last week, actually the week before, and we are lucky now to have with us the director to address the film. Let me just say that this mini film festival is organized by the faculty and staff for justice in Palestine at George Mason University and co-sponsored by Jewish Voices for Peace at George Mason University, Prison Labor Justice Collective, and the GMU, or George Mason University's Coalition for Palestine, and the Gaza in Context Project. We came in to support the broadcast of these important events. Now, our conversation today will be with the director Michael Workman, whom we are very fortunate to host. Michael Workman is a filmmaker whose documentaries have screened at film festivals around the world, including CPH Docs. Perhaps Michael can tell us a little more about these screenings and their value, which is significant. Sheffield Doc / Fest and Full Frame Documentary Film Festival, as well as IFFBoston, Sidewalk Film Festival, and many more. His latest film, The Encampments, which we are going to address today, won the Human Rights Award Special Mention at CPH Docs. His film, Meantime, from 2022, which I will be asking Michael about, won the Best Short Film Award at Telluride Mountainfilm, Best Documentary Award at BendFilm Festival, and the Vimeo Staff Pick Award, which is a big deal because staff don't mess around, at Palm Springs ShortFest. His documentary, From Parts Unknown, from 2018, which I really appreciated, along with many colleagues of mine, and actually do sometimes feature it even in the classroom, won the Grand Jury Prize at the Northwest Filmmakers Festival. I am very excited to be having this conversation with Michael. And again, welcome, Michael, to our mini film festival, because it's a small film festival at George Mason University. How are you?
I'm doing great. Yeah, it's a real honor to be here. And apologies for the kind of word salad in that bio of all these different festival names. Appreciate you going through that.
I mean, it's as I shared with you while we were speaking, we actually had produced a film in 2003, like basically the first film that was produced on Iraq, called About Baghdad, and then again in 2006. And yeah, the names of these film festivals are very interesting. My favorite is IDFA, IDFA in Amsterdam. Michael, before we even look at the trailer, do you mind telling us about this film in terms of, before we get into what's in it, what compelled you to actually work on it, given that it became clear that law enforcement, law in quotation marks, of course, was going to, not let things go smoothly, as well as perhaps insinuating or directly targeting anyone around the camps, including people like yourself who would be filming along with the crew. So if you can tell us a little bit about your initial motivation to actually make the film.
Yeah, I mean, the film was directed by me. involved in the Palestine movement for some years now. And so, escalation of the genocide that followed, most of work was really around reporting on the movement locally and also what was happening in Palestine. So, you know, we both wanted to be working on something substantial in this moment to show solidarity with the Palestinian people and to try to push forward media that challenges kind of the dominant Western and mainstream media narratives around Palestine. So, we were inspired by the student movement. We've been inspired by the movement as a whole, and the opportunity to make a film to help advance that struggle forward, I think to us was something that felt like the most meaningful thing that we could do in this moment. You know, witnessing the genocide unfold and feeling that anything that we could possibly do to help, just feeling the deep desire to do that, and being able to do that in a medium, and for me personally, that I love and that I've been, working at for a long time, was really, really deeply meaningful to me. So, I mean, the film really started though, with Kay's reporting. So Kay is a journalist at Breakthrough News, and he was following the student protests at Columbia since November of 2023, and following them since like SJP and JVP were banned at the end of October, I believe, of 2023. And when the students were deciding to start an encampment, they reached out to a number of trusted media makers and journalists about it, and Kay was one of those people. And so they invited Kay to come onto the encampment before they started. But the students at that time, didn't necessarily know that this, act, that this protest would turn into a global student movement. They really couldn't have seen, just how much the repression of the students being arrested afterwards would create this global movement. And so, Kay basically was the one who was embedded in the encampment for all of the 12 days. He thought he was just coming for one day, ended up staying for the entire time until Hint Hall was raided. And afterwards, Kay was kind of going to just make like a 20-minute piece for Breakthrough News. And one of our producers, Munir, who also is at Watermelon Pictures, he watched the footage and was like, hey, wait, you guys should try to turn this into a documentary film. And so I've been organizing with Kay and know Kay personally, and also one of our other producers, Matt. And so they reached out to me about coming on board to try to turn this into a feature film, which it wasn't really shot for in the beginning. So that was like quite a challenge. But basically, I was really excited by it and immediately flew out to New York, and we started filming all the interviews and getting all the supplemental material, doing research for archival, and, tracking down the other kind of like expert interviews at that point. So we really like hit the ground running. We knew that time was of the essence. And so we wanted to get something out as soon as possible so that we would have something at the ready to be able to respond to the political moment as it unfolded, which ended up being really, really valuable to us, to be able to respond to both, October 8 when that came out, the Zionist counter documentary really to ours, in March, but also once students were started to become abducted, were threatened, and their visas were being revoked. We wanted to have something that we could put forward as a counter narrative to all of the lies that the mainstream media had promulgated, and also that the Trump administration was opportunistically using to shut down dissent in this country.
Thanks, Michael. What about the the trajectory. In other words, you were. I will ask you later. I would like you to speak about your other films and your trajectory as a filmmaker, because people who make good films, and we watched this film at George Mason University, and thousands and thousands of other people have also watched this film elsewhere. It's an important film, and it's a good film. Um, People like that end up actually moving forward and making other work. So can you tell us a little bit about sort of and I know it does fit, but how does it fit in your sort of filmography?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little different film from what I usually make. A lot of the films I make are, following like a single character. They're a little bit slower, and a little bit more, meditative in their pacing, I would say. But I think one of the things that I've learned through the years, and probably is at the core of my like practice as a documentary filmmaker, is really trying to find the emotional truth of any story that I'm following and pull out these universally relatable feelings, to make people emotionally moved, by the stories of the people that they're seeing on the screen. And that may seem like simple or obvious, but I think sometimes, especially with films like The Encampments, we could have taken a different route with this film that would be much more information driven, that would include a lot more things that may have like bogged down the story. But what we really wanted to do was make a very tight and very emotional film, because we know that emotion is what moves people to action, and emotion is really what sticks with people. And we wanted to be able to weave in some context, some information that people could use to understand the student movement and understand Palestine better. But really, the goal was to move people to action. And I think for me, for my other films, I think the skills that I've built over the years is trying to be really emotionally in tune with the people that I'm filming with, to both like make people comfortable and trust us to share their stories and work in a collaborative way with the people that we are making films about, but also to be able to be in tune with all of the subtleties in somebody's story that would relate to somebody else and really like move them. And so I think when we're playing this film out, we wanted to have as many kind of series of this, really this like roller coaster ride of emotions, having highs and lows, and moving in between those, um, and doing that with doing that in a way that is always advancing the story, but is also emotionally intelligent. And I think sometimes, in movement media, we can be very focused on just giving facts. And what we wanted to do with this film is to add that emotional layer. And I think that that's really important when we're making media that is a media that's goal is to move people to action.
Thanks, Michael. I think we will now go to the actual trailer. As I shared, apologies for people who didn't catch it. At George Mason, we did show the film, and we will show the trailer in just a moment. And then we can talk about the trailer. How I mean, there's a lot of clips in the film. There's so much going on. The topic is very dicey, dangerous. It shouldn't be, but it is, and so on. So I'd like to ask you about the trailer once we get to it. Let's see. Okay, so this is the trailer of the Encampments. It's just 2 minutes long, and then we will continue our conversation.
We're here to discuss the little Gazas that have risen up on campuses across America.
There is a movement to radicalize young people.
Can you believe they are chanting about the Intifada in New York City?
I really believe they are brainwashed.
There was a very concerted effort by the media to portray things a certain way and refuse to discuss Gaza. Colombia is materially invested in the genocide in Gaza. We don't want our money to go towards Palestinian death.
I was born and raised in a Palestinian refugee camp. The university was cracking down on Palestinian activism on campus.
It's completely farcical to imply that in any way, like, Jewish people were being persecuted.
I have never felt more proud to be Jewish than when I was pushing our university to divest from genocide.
They would just criminalize anyone who would participate in a protest. That was the moment where students were like, we need to do something more.
Standing near the line! The people they won't leave is what is threatening about divesting and wanting peace.
The university would say like, oh, you're overestimating your power. I remember like telling them there are 60 universities setting up encampments across the United States.
We got Yale holding it down right now on live.
What you willing to risk? What you willing to give? What if you were in Gaza? What if those were your kids?
In '68, the students at Columbia took over the campus, mainly in protest of the war in Vietnam. Columbia talks about how it was okay then, but not okay now.
Bravery is very contagious. We kind of watched Columbia in awe, and we knew we were next.
The only weapon they have is fear, and when we call their bluff, they have nothing!
Yeah, that's a lot. It's short, but there's a lot going on, and of course, we saw Mahmoud Khalil and a few other, speakers who have led the movement in Colombia. Can you tell us just a little bit about the trailer and how is it that you selected from this vast? I'm sure you've had, maybe hundreds of hours of taping, which is usually the case. Why did you put this particular trailer together? And I'm assuming this happened before the arrest of Mahmoud Khalil.
The trailer was being cut before Mahmoud was arrested. It changed afterwards, but we hadn't finished it yet or finalized it. I mean, largely because we weren't actually planning on releasing the film widely until next fall at that timeline, and that moved up once students were starting to get abducted and Mahmoud was abducted. Then we decided that we needed to strike while the iron was hot. So at that point, then we kind of fast tracked to try to finish the trailer. So it was already in a working state. But Watermelon Pictures, our distributor, was one that was really like spearheading the editing of the trailer too. So
okay,
for us,
yeah, Watermelon Pictures had they're doing an amazing job. If you look at all of the films most of the films or many of the films that we are featuring and others have actually been produced or distributed by Watermelon Pictures. So I want to get to that in just a minute. But so the trailer was not put together by the directors.
Well, we directed the trailer, but we didn't edit it ourselves.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. I edited the film with Maddock, who is a really incredible editor. But then the trailer was then made from the film edit by people at Watermelon, and so. But we were directing it, so the idea was that we wanted to make something that was both like emotionally impactful, but also like ended in a way that showed power and inspiration instead of a feeling of like defeat. I think that was one of the tones of the film that we knew we wanted to end with, is not to end in this necessarily a tragedy, but to end in a position where people feel moved to action. And so we wanted that to be in the trailer too. I mean, cutting a 80-minute film from all of the material that we had was incredibly challenging. The amount of things that we loved and wanted to include in the film that aren't in the film is massive. And then taking that and trying to turn it into a 2-minute piece is even more challenging. So we wanted people to get a sense of who the film would be mainly focusing on, mostly Sweda, Paulette, Grant Miner, and Mahmoud Khalil, and just to get an idea of like the energy of it too, because it's just one of the things from Kay's footage is that it's just really, really kinetic. It really does a great job of just like capturing the energy on the encampment, and so we wanted that to come through in the trailer too.
I actually do have a technical question before we get to the actual film, its politics, and the way you filmed it, and how what sorts of challenges you faced, and that is when you make the trailer or when you try to get an excerpt. And we have done this before, even though we are not filmmakers, but we make research-based documentaries. Did you think about a trailer that represents the film, the documentary more, or a trailer that would actually be targeted towards an audience that you want to actually watch this film? I'm assuming you might know the difference. I mean, maybe the difference is not great, but sometimes there is a difference depending on who you'd like to watch it and how you'd like it to how you'd like to quote unquote market it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're always thinking of target audiences, really, when we're making. I mean, when we were making the film itself, we were thinking about, the types of people, the groups in which we think that the film would resonate with. And then with the marketing and with the trailer, we're also thinking about that. I think that the trailer is not fully, obviously, representative of the film, but I think it's targeted to get certain people into the theater. And definitely I think we didn't want to make a trailer that would be like too heavy or too much of like too devastating, because even though I think the film itself is much more devastating than what's in the trailer, but we wanted it to be an open invitation for people to come and not feel like, especially even people who are like, deeply involved in the movement, who are constantly consuming images from Gaza right now, like sometimes the idea of like going into a theater to consume more of those images and the trauma that comes from that, but also, the pain, we didn't want people to feel like that's, what this whole film would be, to come into it. But I think, in an 80-minute film, we have the time to, go into those places in a controlled amount of time to get people emotional, to remind people of why the students were doing what they were doing, and then to bring them back into the protest, with that fresh on their mind, but also to be inspired by, the collective power of these students and the bravery in face of their repression.
Can you take us through the actual film and tell us a little bit about the different segments and how it was actually working towards an arc, if this is how you made it or how you structured it? We do want people to take a look at the film. I know that Watermelon Pictures offers a number of ways to watch the film, and some of them are quite affordable. So I urge everyone to do that, but in lieu of this at this point, if you could just take us through the film and its arc, if possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think the primary structuring device of the film is the encampments. So the 12 days of the occupation of the Columbia University lawn. we used that as it's kind of like a built-in arc. This may be this is the only film that I've made that really follows the more traditional kind of like 3-act structure of like, you know, the things that they teach you in film school of script writing and whatnot. So we, you know, start with kind of the media blitz around the encampments, really trying to meet people where they're at, maybe people who are not involved in the movement. They're probably familiar with all of the lies and the smears that were, levied against all of these students. And so we wanted to make a sequence that hit the energy of those, captured the energy of those lies, but also showed that there was much more to this story, and that there was this counter narrative that wasn't being shown. And that's through, you know, actually talking to the students and seeing what their experience was on campus and why they were doing what they're doing. So the film then kind of gets into the origins of the movement at Columbia, the history of divestment there, and what everything that led up to them deciding to make an encampment. So, you know, they really had tried everything. They had done peaceful protests, they had done interruptions, they had done, you know, writing really incredible and detailed plans on how to execute divestment from Israel and divestment from the American war machine. And all of those fell on deaf ears. And so then we kind of go through the start of the encampment and through their first arrests. And that was really the moment that triggers the global movement. You know, once people saw the repression on Columbia's campus, and they saw that in spite of that repression, the students were able to occupy another lawn next to that one and continue their encampment. I think that is like kind of the pivotal moment that sparks the entire global movement, because there had been encampments before this encampment, but it was that scene that really moved people to action. And so then we stay on the encampment. We go to Gaza to, you know, really understand why the students are doing what they were doing and what specifically they were responding to at this moment, while still kind of contextualizing that as this, you know, this movement didn't start, you know, after October 7th, that this movement for divestment, this movement for, you know, a liberated Palestine had been going on at Columbia for decades beforehand. And that this, you know, most recent escalation is just part of a longer, you know, history of this movement there. Then we get, you know, into just day-to-day life on the encampment, you know, people singing songs, people, you know, having, you know, different religious services, Jewish, Muslim, you know, Christian services on campus, on the encampment, and, you know, really trying to create that counter narrative to what we were seeing in the media, which was that these encampments were unsafe for Jewish students, that they were hotbeds for terrorism and violence, which was just completely untrue. And, you know, the footage speaks for itself on that front, really. Then we get into UCLA's encampment, the violent repression there, the counter-protester Zionist violence against the students, and go through the history of the movement in 1968 at Columbia, where they were protesting the Vietnam War and occupying, you know, multiple buildings on campus, and really creating a lot more property destruction and longer term occupations than the occupation of Hamilton Hall, which was renamed Hins Hall, at the end of the Columbia encampment. And then we get into the decision making behind that strategic move, why the students felt it was necessary to take over Hins Hall and rename it. And then we get into the, you know, repression of the student movement. And we wanted to end on a hopeful note. So, you know, I don't want to spoil that fully, but, you know, it's really, the film ends with, you know, Mahmoud, you know, reflecting on what it would be like, what would be the first thing that he would want to do after Palestine is free, going back there. So yeah, that's kind of the overall structure, the major spoiler.
Sorry, your film was trying to basically intervene. I apologize.
It has a mind of its own. Sorry, can't control it anymore.
I really appreciate that, and I really hope that it will be screened more. I know that we will also work on trying to screen it publicly, perhaps when school resumes or universities and so on resume in the fall. In the meantime, I'd like to ask you a question about how, as you well know, documentaries are generally thought of as being unbiased. But this film, of course, has a clear slant, and it's kind of obvious why, from a humanitarian perspective, but politically, those who don't necessarily see that angle will scoff at the non-objective nature of films like this, as though all the films on BBC and whatnot, even on PBS and so on. I'm even selecting the most, or relatively some of the centrist outlets. Could you talk a little bit about the politics of the film and how you were able to navigate them, and this ludicrous idea of making quote unquote an unbiased film, right? I mean, I don't need to mention conflicts in the past, this or last century, where if you actually suggest an unbiased film regarding certain topics that a lot of these people today who are critiquing some of these films as being unbiased, they would scoff at you, right? If you are looking at the fascism of the 20th century and documentations of it and trying to show the other side, actually you would be accused of being a racist because of the humanitarian angle usually connected to films that depict genocide or slaughter and things of the sort. So if you can tell us a little bit about that aspect and how you navigated it, given this new McCarthyism, this atmosphere that we're living under today, then and now, because things also have developed or changed, not to make a big distinction between the previous or this administration.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I teach at University of San Francisco, and I teach documentary film production. And one of the first things that I go through with my students in the very first class is just talking about, are documentaries truthful? Are they objective? Are they unbiased? And, unfortunately, a lot of students, young people, come into that class thinking that, yes, they represent the truth. They can be objective. They can show, all sides or, both sides of an issue. And, then it's one of my favorite kind of thought exercises, because then we can think about, okay, so if you're making a documentary, you first of all are deciding what you're going to shoot. You're deciding how you're going to shoot it. Even if you are filming a situation unfolding, you're deciding what direction the camera is pointing, what's in and out of the frame. And then you start editing and you decide the fraction of a percentage of the overall footage that you're going to use to tell a specific story. So every choice that you're making is incredibly subjective. And that is actually the art form. The art form is to, articulate a perspective through the means of nonfiction cinema. And that it's not about, creating a false sense of objectivity. It's also not about misrepresenting things. I think that line can be blurred sometimes. But it's about using, the real life as the raw material to tell a story and to articulate a truth. And for us with this film, we knew that from the outset, we wanted to make a film that articulated the student perspective. that wasn't, a film that was spending time necessarily articulating the counter-protester perspective or all of these other perspectives, because those perspectives that are against Palestinian liberation, that are for the genocide and ethnic cleansing of Palestine, are the perspectives in which we are deeply saturated in this society in the United States. The mainstream media, it is the mainstream media's one perspective that they give out that is largely fabricated and fallacious. And so we wanted to show something that from the other perspective. So there's, I think when we were going into it, we thought that there would be more pushback against this, given the ways in which Americans are lied to about Palestine and are lied to about the student movement. But largely, it's been received well. And I think, people who still feel that the legitimacy of the occupation of Palestine by Zionists, I think are made uncomfortable by it and maybe not always convinced of it. But our goal isn't necessarily to reach that far across the aisle, but to try to, find the people, in the movement who are feeling, tired, who are feeling defeated, to recontextualize what their experience was and to show it to them in an emotional way that reminds them of the collective power that they have and just how much the movement has moved the conversation so far, and that, this repression that students are facing is just a sign of fear that the status quo is actually threatened, and that this is all that they can do, is to do hard power repression of students. And we also wanted the film to be able to relate to people kind of on the periphery of that, people who maybe consume mainstream media and are can be moved to the side of Palestinian liberation and to the side of the student movement if they're given, counter information to the information, the fake information that the mainstream news was peddling. So, I hope that this film and these conversations around it can push our collective media literacy forward to understand that every film, every piece of media has a bias and has a slant. And the most dishonest thing any media maker can do is to tell you that they've made a completely objective film, or a film that, really considers all sides. Because in any case, they always have control over how each of these parties or perspectives are depicted. And I think one thing that is interesting, I think it plays into the Palestine exception, is that we are asked this mostly by mainstream media outlets, why there's not this Israeli perspective in this film, all of the time. And for us, the counter to that is why are you not why are you not showing the Palestinian perspective? But also, would you ask this of a filmmaker who is making a film about the invasion of Ukraine? Would you ask them to fully consider the side of Russia? Would you, if a filmmaker was making a film about the civil rights movement in the United States in the 1950s and 60s, would you ask them that they need to balance it out with the perspective of the segregationists, or the perspective of the KKK? They wouldn't ask those things, because now those political perspectives are aligned with the hegemonic view in the United States. They're aligned with American geopolitical interests, especially when we're talking about the war in Ukraine. But when it comes to Palestine, all of a sudden, now that you're showing a Palestinian perspective, it has to be fully balanced with the Zionist perspective. And I think it's just obviously the case that they're doing this because it's Palestine, and because Palestine is an essential part of the United States imperialist war machine and their control over the Middle East. And so it threatens their, hegemonic control over a really, really geopolitically important area of the world.
Yeah, I can't I mean, I have the patience, but sometimes I can easily see how people can run out of patience when people talk about objectivity, especially the very same people who are addressing Palestine related matters. It's almost an anthropological phenomenon, like something to like marvel at and be like, wow. I mean, imagine these people existed in World War II and they're trying to show, Mussolini's or Hitler's perspective equally in order to be objective and so on and so forth. Unbelievable. I think that's like a theme of all of this. All right. I would like to speak with you about your own trajectory and your own filmography and your own journey in relation to this film. And a couple of other quick things, including how you see this film as a tool for the movement for justice in Palestine, the movement to end the genocide and the war and the slaughter, and so on. But first, let me share, because a couple of people have emailed me like directly or texted me and are asking, in the feed. By the way, people are wondering why YouTube views are low. It's largely because our YouTube views are usually lower during the taping, and then they sort of multiply. If you look at the YouTube channel, it's in the thousands usually for most screenings or more. It's actually the Twitter/X live viewing that is sort of the majority of the live viewers generally. So let me just share with everyone so here we go. This is the Watermelon Pictures website, and you could see here the different films that are offered: The Encampments, The Teacher, Sudan, Remember Us, To a Land Unknown, From Ground Zero, which we actually featured at George Mason University in the Johnson Cinema, Johnson Center Cinema, and Israelism, which made a big splash in the United States, as well as many other films that I think are really worth watching. The way to watch, if you are interested in, for instance, let's say, what is a good film to feature? Let's feature The Encampments. That would be a good idea. So you click on it, all right, and then you could take a look at the material, at the actual trailer, and then you could find The Encampments in theaters nationwide, and then you could scroll down and request a screening. So you can connect with the Watermelon Pictures, which I urge because of the incredible work they're doing. And they're doing this just so people know, because I have a direct contact with the folks at Watermelon Pictures. They're not doing this for profit, as in it is for profit. It's not a non-profit, but they're doing this because it is crucial. It's important, despite all odds and despite all challenges. So I do urge people to support these films, the directors, the filmmakers, as well as the distributor. So you click on view a form to request a screening, right? So right here. Oh, you guys cannot see my... So on the right-hand side, you can request a screening, and then you could share which type of screening you'd like to request. It looks like a daunting form, but all forms are daunting, and it's the bane of my own personal existence. But you could actually get it done in a couple of minutes, and there are ways to spend less, especially if it's not for commercial use. So I urge you to take a look at the site and see if you can do a group screening, a community screening, university screening, or public screening of some sort. either way, I think it is very, very much worthwhile. Do you have any commentary about Watermelon Pictures and how people can actually screen any kind of background or enticing words?
Yeah, I mean, they're, I think really, trying to create a distribution platform for Palestinian stories and stories that, aren't being picked up by other distributors because they're scared of the politics of them. And they're really trying to break the silence around stories around Palestine. And I think it's like, yeah, it's not necessarily like a very profitable venture. It's a venture that has a mission, a political mission to get these films out, and it's very challenging to, pay for all of the things to get a film out. And I think they've done a really great job of curating a really incredible, swath of films that is growing a lot as they move forward, because it's still a young distribution company. It's only, a year and some change old. So, great films on there. I mean, Israelism is also, they've been helping promote our film also, has had big impact. The film 3 Promises, which is coming out soon, is a really incredible personal documentary that takes place in the West Bank during the Second Intifada. And that is actually also edited by Maddock, who is the editor, one of our co-editors on the Encampments too. Yeah, I mean, I think they've just been really, great to work with, and we've been able to work with them in a way where we can, move on a dime to meet the moment and strike while the iron is hot. At least with the Encampments, we changed our release strategy in over a few days, really drastically, and so they're all really deeply committed to getting these stories out. And I feel like it's, reflecting on just how much the conversation has changed around Palestine and films that show Palestinian stories. It's like, we could have, I think 2 years ago, it would have been impossible for us to have as wide of a release of this film as we've had. And 2 years ago, it would have been impossible for No Other Land to win the Oscar. And now, we've really been able to start breaking through the silence around Palestine and showing the industry that they're being cowards in not picking up these films, because these films have audience, and these films can even, get enough people into theaters to really to have a successful release and even turn a little bit of a profit, hopefully, so that these filmmakers and distributors can keep doing what they're doing. And yeah, I think it's just been just reflecting on that change to me gives me like a lot of hope. Because yeah, it's hard to imagine a distribution company like Watermelon, over 2 years ago being able to be as successful as it is.
Can you, at this point, tell us a little bit, Michael, about how people can use this film as a tool, whether it's individuals, groups? I know that, I should actually also say that in various, movements and groups, which now proliferate, as you probably know, as everybody knows, because all of our lives right now are on what you call Instagram. Sorry, not Instagram. Signal lists, because everyone probably has a ton of signal lists that they're on. There are ways to do this more efficiently. What would you suggest? And before you do that, let me just share something here, which is from the Instagram of Watermelon Pictures, which you can find at watermelonpictures.com. Is this note that I'm going to put on the screen in red, which is very interesting and important. And it says from Instagram, Watermelon Pictures Instagram, a Palestinian-owned film label that promises to make sure that from now on, Palestine will be seen from the river to the screen. I just thought that's important, especially for the racist people that think that this phrase is racist because it calls for equality.
So insane.
Of freedom for all from the river to the sea. Unbelievable. The running theme of the past 18 months vis-a-vis these human beings that actually favor supremacy over equality. Anyway, so tools and how this can be a tool. If you can share with us your ideas, I'm sure you've had a lot of experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're like through kind of the first phase of our like campaign with it, which is that we've had a very successful theatrical run in the United States. And I think that in itself, the movement and people who are really passionate about the film, they made that happen through the promotion of those screenings, through getting people into those screenings who maybe wouldn't have come otherwise. And just relentlessly, getting people, promoting the film. And that, I think, has the impact of impacting all those people who are in the theater, but it also has, long-term impacts for the industry as a whole, and doing exactly what Watermelon Pictures here is talking about, which is getting Palestine seen. Because again, if theaters see that people will show up for films about Palestine, they will start picking those films up more and taking the political risk that comes with that, because it's good for business. It's good for those local theaters. As far as the way that we think like organizations and the movement can use this, right now, we're starting we're starting to screen in universities all across the country. We'll be picking that back up again in the fall. We hope that, community organizations like book screenings of the film. And I think what's really key is, trying for people who are already initiated, people who are already in the movement, people who are already pro-Palestine, to try to think about the people in their lives who would benefit from seeing a film like this and could be moved, and to try to really invite them to come watch the film with them, and to sit down with them and watch the film and have a conversation, a patient conversation with them around it, to try to see if this can be a thing that can help move them towards being more pro-Palestine, towards seeing the student movement as the brave heroes that they are, and not as these, dangerous, terrorists in the way that the mainstream media tried to depict them as. I think also, it's a tool for the movement to, get into more of the nitty gritty of, how this particular encampment unfolded, the setbacks, the defeats, but also the successes of it, and analyze that. And I also think for people who are tired in the movement, that this can be a tool to, get energized again, to see that, we are winning. It's just a long process and it's hard. And that means that there are sometimes setbacks, but we are moving forward, and that we need to keep pushing. We just showed this film at San Francisco State University the other day, and it was a really inspiring screening. And there's students there who are on hunger strike right now for divestment from the California State University system, from Israel, and from weapons manufacturers. And those hunger striking students, let us know that this film was really, really inspiring to them in this moment, to give them more energy when they're, feeling famished and not nourished, that they can feel like this is something that will help them see, the importance of what they're doing, and that it's not all for nothing. And so, I really hope if folks are feeling that way and they haven't seen the film, to try to go out and see it. It's also will be available on Watermelon Plus. So that's Watermelon is set up their own kind of subscription service with films around Palestine, and films that are on that service are outside of just the films that they distribute too. And you can pretty cheaply sign up for that now. And the encampments eventually will be available on that platform too. and it will also eventually be available for rent, digital rent, which will be an affordable way to screen the film once we're kind of, slowing down a little bit on the grassroots screening themselves.
Thanks, Michael. I would like us to, there's a lot of other questions that I have and a couple of people have, but I do want you to, if you don't mind, go through your filmography and your journey. You can tell us a little bit about the films that you made and prior to this film, and what might be in store for the future before we close. I'd love to hear that, because as I was sharing earlier with you and here, the people who make good films that are really important, and this is perhaps, please correct me if I'm wrong, this is the only full feature documentary on the encampments?
Yes, but there's other films in the work too.
That was a very sweet pause on your part, even though we know that this is the case. But yes, so I would love to feature like the work of you and others who participated in the film and sort of made the film and directed it. So if you can tell us about your filmography, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I actually started out as a artist in undergrad, and I started working as a film festival programmer at the Big Sky Documentary Film Festival in Missoula, Montana, which is where I grew up. And so that's how I kind of got into documentary filmmaking and seeing the form and really falling in love with it. And after college, I was trying to write a script for a film about underground professional wrestlers because I was fascinated by them. I wasn't really like a professional wrestling fan when I was a kid. And I love the kind of like, I was interested in the themes of like performed masculinity and violence in kind of these post-industrial, largely like white abandoned communities in middle America. And so I was writing a script about it and decided to go to some in the neighboring city of Spokane, Washington. And I got to know a lot of the people there and their stories, and it was so compelling to me that I just decided to make a film about one of those underground professional wrestlers. And it really hit on a lot of the themes that I initially wanted to make a scripted film about. And I just love the process so much, and enjoy just really like spending time with people and getting to know people in places that, you would never have access to otherwise in your life. It's kind of like the beauty of being a documentary filmmaker is it's very enriching because you're able to be in so many diverse, different experiences and really try to deeply understand all of these different people from different backgrounds that are different from your own and sometimes similar. And so that film ended up screening at film festivals and did better than I expected. I then ended up going to the Stanford documentary film MFA program, where I made multiple films over the 2 years that I was there. And my thesis film I made during COVID. It's a film called Meantime that's about my dad, and it's kind of a slow, melancholic film about familial guilt, but also trying to transitioning from being a child to being somebody who is taking care of their parent and the dynamics of that. And also, the challenge of being a child of somebody who you're also trying to help alleviate the guilt of all of the things that they feel like they did wrong in their parenting that still haunt them. And so that film is kind of, it's a short, it's around 20 minutes that explores that time with my dad. And, those are really kind of like the main films that I directed before this point. So they were all shorts. And I've been working also on developing a film about the memory of labor unionism and socialism in the American West in a post-industrial mining town in Montana called Butte. And that film is kind of a collective portrait of different people in the community, exploring the historical memory of these radical labor struggles that happened there in the early 1900s, where, you know, labor leaders were being lynched very publicly by, you know, company hired goons. And there were these really big battles against capitalism in an unexpected place. So that's a film that I've been working on for a number of years now that I'll continue working on, along with some other unexpected trajectories. So, you know, this film kind of came out of the blue. Like, you know, the Encampments happened so quickly and we jumped on it, and I pushed everything aside for that. And so, and it was a great opportunity. And yeah, so we'll see where the next film goes. I mean, one of the things about documentary filmmaking is you have so many ideas that you even get very far along with filming, editing, and most of the time, those don't end up becoming films for a number of reasons. It could be funding, it could be that there wasn't enough story development or whatever. And then something just takes, and generally it's unexpected, you know, and that's kind of how it was with the Encampments.
If someone wants to support Watermelon Pictures, of course we shared that they could go on and you know, go to watermelonpictures.com and actually you know, contribute by screening and showing some of these films, hopefully including the Encampments. But if somebody wants to support you, Michael, because I think you're one of the, you know, movers and shakers who will actually continue to do important work especially in this environment, because as we shared, it's been more than a year since the installation of the Encampments, and you know, there hasn't been a lot. I mean, there's been like shorter pieces, and I recognize some of them, but this is the only full feature documentary. So thank you, first of all, thank you, and to everyone who was involved, the producers, the everything's in the film. Can you tell us how can people support you, or is there something that I could put on screen, like a website or something that they can you know, reach you at? You don't have to.
They could. Yeah, sure. I mean, I have a website. It's just michaeltworkman.com, and that is just updated with projects as they are finished and released. But people can also follow me on Instagram. It's just at Michael Workman. And it's set to private, but I let people in who are cool, and who are down, and not Zionists who are trying to dox me. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, being able to like follow my work is always the most helpful thing. I think, you know, follow Breakthrough News also. You know, Breakthrough is really the production company that hired me to work on the film, and they do incredible work, and they have some new documentaries, of which I've been able to help out on 2 that are coming down the pipeline, hopefully within the next year. And, you know, supporting Watermelon Pictures is really important too, by just going to screenings, booking screenings, signing up for Watermelon Plus if that's something that you're interested in, and just following them too on Instagram. And if you're interested in following the Encampments more to see where it's screening to, people can follow the Instagram page, which is just at the Encampments on Instagram. So, you know, I feel like it's a strange time for documentary filmmakers, because, you know, a lot of the historic ways in which we've been able to support our projects to get them funded are being eviscerated right now by the Trump administration, you know, destroying the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the NEA, the National Endowment for the Arts. So people are really scared, and it's going to be like a hard time for independent media. I mean, we knew when we were making this film that the only way we could do it was to go outside of those funding structures, because those funding structures are still funded by the US government. and still have a political bent of which this film might not totally align. So, we had to, one, invest our own into financial assets or capital into this film, and then seek other people who would help, donate to the film. So I think, following and helping support if people have the means in whatever small way, if there's another funding push for a future project, that's the best way that you could help any filmmaker, other than, watching their films and sharing it and talking about it with people.
Absolutely. So people can find the other links that you suggested if they go to your website, michaeltworkman.com, including your your social media handles and so on. So it's up on the screen above you to the right. And so is the watermelonpictures.com. And so are the co-organizers, co-sponsors of this event, the Faculty in Justice for Palestine at George Mason University, Jewish Voices for Peace at George Mason University, the the GMU Coalition for Palestine, as well as the Prison Labor Justice Collective, and of course the Gaza in Context Project. Is it me, or am I getting all these texts right now that it's actually official that Trump canceled federal funding for NPR, which has been in the news for a few days? So that's all the more reason. That's all the more reason for us to produce as you are, and sort of to copy you, emulate you, be inspired by you and your work and the work of so many people that have produced visionary storytelling narratives at Watermelon Pictures and beyond. So thank you for giving us a slice of your work, and I will hope that we can be in touch so we can keep up with your work going forward, and feature your work as well. And I'd love to actually host you for another conversation on other films that you've made, along with others who have actually been instrumental, not just in terms of making films that, for the public, which is perhaps the most important, but also for making films that that can be shown in the classroom, right? This is very important as well. As the repression on campus continues, from administrators, university presidents, and deans who are, who just prefer to be subservient to the powers that be or to their ideologies. I mean, it's either or, and sometimes both, but it's not always ideological. Sometimes it's just, basically abandoning the mission that they that probably drove for them to join a university setting. And it's important to actually be able to maintain this work and maintain this exposure for the public and for students and so on. Is there anything else, Michael, that you'd like to share before we let you go? I said an hour max because we want this to sort of be short and circulate at a time when school is ending, but I'm always lying about these things. I mean, I don't mean it, but I tried, but there's a lot to talk about. Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
I mean, I think we pretty much covered it, but I feel like, we are trying to kind of end our conversations sometimes just reflecting on the horrors of the repression that is happening right now against the Palestine movement, against any semblance of wins from the civil rights movement, and also, things that support everyday working class people. And I feel like, for us reflecting on this film in this moment is that, this repression and this blitzkrieg style, austerity that we're seeing right now is a sign that, the status quo, that the administration feels threatened, especially around Palestine, especially around losing the narrative around it. And that I think we should take this as a sign that we need to keep pushing and not retreat, even though it's really scary right now. And especially those in our like activist community who aren't as vulnerable, you know, people who are citizens, you know, people who are white, people who have, you know, certain privileges that allow them to, you know, have some, you know, screen against the state, that this is the time to stand up and keep moving forward, and especially to protect our students. Also, if people are interested, I know probably a lot of people are already following this, but if they're interested in following Mahmoud's case, they should check out at Justice for the number 4 Mahmoud on Instagram, and that's the best way to get updates from him. And we really miss him, and we want him to come home as soon as possible so he can be with his son.
Justice for Mahmoud.
Yep.
So, is this it?
That's it. Yeah.
Okay. Mahmoud spelled O-U-D, which is different than O-O-D. Both work, but this one is O-U-D. At Justice for Mahmoud. If you'd like to support, and I'll make it a little bigger, depending on what device you're watching on. All right. Thank you very much. And a friend of mine just sent me something related to what you shared, which is, let me see if I can put it online. I mean, on the screen. 1 second. Basically, the Watermelon Plus. Let me see if I could App Store. Yeah, there we go. There you go. It's the Watermelon Plus, which allows you to stream, but I'm not sure under what conditions. Are you aware, Michael, under what conditions and prices? I mean, this is just like almost, this is happening as we speak.
Yeah, I think it's a subscription-based model. I believe it's $7.99 a month, and it's just it's a large library of, you know, mostly films about Palestine and other issues related to it. And yeah, you can download the app so that you can use it on like your Roku or on your phone. But also you can just go on the Watermelon Plus website and use it kind of like you would use Netflix on your laptop. So it's basically just a streaming platform that Watermelon has created.
That's awesome. Okay, this is really cool. All right. So I, on behalf of everyone joining us today, and on behalf of all the organizers that have made this possible, as well as Waterman Pictures, the Encampments team, as well as yourself, Michael. We thank everybody for joining us today. Lots of interesting comments on a couple of platforms, and there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of outrage, which is good, you know, especially if you channel it properly in the direction of enhancing basically the liberation of Palestine. That is very important for even the people who don't support Palestine. They don't realize how important this is for them and for the future. Hopefully they will come to that determination. Michael, thank you so much for your time, primarily. I really appreciate you coming on, and I hope to stay in touch with you.
Please do. Yeah, it's been a real honor and a great conversation. And, you know, good luck to everybody out there who's doing the work right now. I know there's a lot of moving people who are watching this probably right now. And so, you know, keep up the fight. We'll win.
Thanks, Habibi. Have a wonderful time, and we will see you soon, and keep up the good work.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Take care.